Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Octopus 101 update, if you want to call it that. This is a webinar that we have hosting monthly, and its purpose is to educate you, the attendee, about Octopus Deploy. If you haven't seen Octopus before, this is a great session for you to be a part of. We'll basically take you through all the basic premises of Octopus itself, how it works, what it does, why it does what it does, which is a very important question to answer when you're looking at technology. And we'll show a bunch of demos and kind of kick the tires, and hopefully that will provide you a nice sort of introduction to Octopus Deploy. If you have a chance, feel free to let us know where you're joining us from in the comments today. We're going to be answering your questions live on this webinar, so feel free to take advantage of the chat window. Let us know where you're reaching us from. And if you have any questions at all, anytime during this webinar, we will answer them live here in this session. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and switch over to my slides, and let's get things started. So I will now, through the magic of software, switch over to my screen here. Excellent. So like I said before, this is a 101 session. So for those who are not familiar, 101 basically means, introduction. So using the US college nomenclature. So this is going to be an introduction to Octopus Deploy. Like I said, the who, where, what, when, and why of Octopus Deploy. And so we're going to take a look at how we can use this to improve your deployment process using Octopus. My name is John Bristowe. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today. Please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. You can reach me at this email address here. And if you have any questions at all about this what you've seen in this webinar or anything about Octopus itself, I'm going to be more than happy to answer them. What you're going to learn during this webinar. So we're going to take a look at a few things in this session. We're going to take a look at not only how Octopus works, but we're also going to take a look at answering the question why you should use it. When looking at a new technology that's new to anyone, understanding the why is very important because it helps you to provide context about why you would use a technology. What problem does it solve? How does it help me in my day-to-day? Then we'll take a look at the fundamentals of Octopus. So things like there's going to be a lot of taxonomy you're going to learn in this session. So things like projects, deployment processes, releases, these and other sort of terms you're going to hear us talk about over and over again in this session. By the end of it, it's my hope that you'll have a solid understanding of what these things mean and why they're important and how they work. Third, we're going to take a look at how to create a deployment process. This is where the rubber hits the road. So we're going to take a look at how you go about the process of deploying software via Octopus and what benefits Octopus provides for your deployment processes. And then finally, we're going to kind of make it full circle, and we're going to integrate this as part of a continuous integration process or server like GitHub Actions. So typically the way that things happen in the case of a CI/CD pipeline is you'll have a build and test that will run through a CI process or a server, and then things will be passed over to Octopus. And we're going to take a look at how your deployments will be triggered through that process. So that's the lay of the land. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. More than happy to answer them live here in the webinar. So let's talk about the state of the world today. So this is a very simple example, but I'm trying to demonstrate the reasons why you want to use Octopus. So in a very simple case, this is probably circa 1990s, circa 2000s, for those who are old enough to remember. You would typically have a scenario that would look like this. You would have an app, and you as a developer or possibly an IT pro or now a DevOps engineer would use a set of scripts to deploy that into production. And that would basically make your customers very happy. Life was great. You were happy. And the reason why is because it was a simple deployment process. But as we know, software is not like this. Typically what happens in the case of software is deployments can be a little bit tricky. And so when you look at the state of the world with more advanced scenarios, you have different customers using your software, different types of customers using your software. You also have different targets of your software. So some bits of software will run on the cloud, some will run in Kubernetes, some will run on-prem. And because of that, the nature of your deployments can become a little bit more complex. So you as the DevOps engineer now have the sort of arduous task of creating different types of deployment scripts in this scenario. So you have to deploy to different types of targets, satisfying different types of users. So in this case, we have different types of users denoted by those subscripts there. And so you can see that I get version 2 of one on a particular target, but I may only have version 1 of a different type of app for a different type of target and different type of customer. So we have different types of apps, we have different types of targets, we have different types of versions. So now you can see the expression on your face has become a little bit less happy. It's because you're having to manage all this stuff. And this can get harder as you grow and scale. So as a developer of software, when you go about deploying software that is, nuanced and varied and changes depending upon who's using it, now life can get really, really hard. And this is where the scenario of using deployment scripts, symbol text files, etc., tends to fall down. Notice that in this scenario, we don't even talk about rollbacks. So sometimes, and yes, this does happen, you push changes into production and those changes fail and you have to roll back those changes. And you want to be sensitive to that. You want to maybe obliterate the database, for example. Now you're stuck with it. So these and other sorts of scenarios are difficult. And so this is the reason why. This is why you use a solution like Octopus Deploy. What Octopus Deploy does is it makes your complex deployments easy. And the way it does this is through a managed process, which is what Octopus does. It is your single pane of glass towards automating your deployments. And it is the source of truth on how you manage all of your enterprise deployment processes with consistency and compliance. Those are two key parts of Octopus, because you want to know not only what happened, but do it in a way that's reliable and repeatable. So those are very, very important aspects to Octopus, and this is what we specialize in. You'll see other solutions out there that basically do everything. So there's many solutions out there that will do not only the build, test, deployment, monitoring, observability, etc., and everything under sun. But the reality is that those solutions don't do a great job of deployments. That's where we come in. We specialize in deployments. That's what we do. And so we are part of what we like to think of as a best of breed pipeline. So if you think of a pipeline shifting, left to right here, on the left-hand side, you may have some kind of issue tracker. Jira is very popular. There are many others as well. Those issues will then stem changes that you'll check into source code. GitHub is popular. GitLab is popular. There are many others as well. You'll then build and test using a CI solution or continuous integration solution. That is a well understood scenario. And then you'll push those changes to a target that is, again, a well understood and solved scenario. But that middle bit there, that's in the question mark, that the deployment, that is what we believe is a very not solved sort of area of this pipeline. And that's where we kind of come in. Octopus Deploy fills that space and provides the best of breed solution for your pipeline. And pipelines are varied. Like we've seen many different instances of pipelines, and you're not using one vendor across. So you're typically bringing in lots of different vendors. In addition to that, you're targeting various other scenarios as well. So you may, in one case, target GitHub Actions. In another case, you may use Jenkins. You may choose to target one cloud provider or multiple cloud providers. In addition to that, there are other things as well that come into the mix. Provisioning, operations, compliance, ITSM, all these sort of aspects come into the notion of what is a deployment. And so we integrate with all of that, and we provide, ways in which you can utilize these in a very seamless manner. And so that's kind of the goal of Octopus, is to try and solve that problem as part of the best of breed pipelines, like as we talk about. All right, so that is the sort of lay of the land. Let's go in and get into a demo here, and let's jump into the dashboard here. So this is the dashboard for Octopus Deploy. The dashboard is basically your one-stop shop for everything that is Octopus related. So Octopus provides this dashboard, and what you see here is on the left-hand side, you'll see your projects. So you'll have things like a backend database, you may have a website, and inside here, you'll have a set of environments. Now, you can have as many environments as you want, but typically we denote 3 here: development, production, and staging. In addition to that, you'll have the various versions of your application that have been deployed to those environments. So if I had other environments and if I had other apps versions here, I would see those. The reason why I show you this here is just to show you basically the base case. This is what you'll see when running this very simply. But I'd like to take a step back and even go one step further back. I'd like to go ahead and show you what this looks like right from the very beginning. This is sort of like when life began. And so what I'd like to do here is create a new space here called Octopus 101, which is named after this session. Let's go ahead and create this space here. And let's jump into this space. Spaces, by the way, are a isolation boundary. It's a way of separating your projects from each other so that you don't have collisions, and you have clear separation of concerns, and you can separate by permissions, et cetera, et cetera. So a space is kind of like its own sort of thing. It's where you can live, and you can destroy these, and you're safe from basically deleting other projects, et cetera. So we provide you this experience of, first run experience, which is nice. So you can get started here, and we'll show you, I'll just basically walk you through what this looks like here. So we'll go ahead and create, the canonical sort of hello world. You'll notice that we have some options here. So for example, I can specify whether or not I want to use version control with this project. So this is a feature we have called config as code. And what this basically means is that we will persist the definition of this project to source control. So that source control can be anything that's Git-based. If you're using GitHub, great, you can use that. But what that allows you to do is make changes and check in those changes to your projects, and those will be synced up through Octopus. We have other options as well. I'm not going to worry right now about what those options are, but just know that those are things that you can control. So we'll go ahead and save this. We've created a new project called Hello World. And the next step we're going to do is define our environments. So an environment is just a canonical sort of semantically meaningless, well, I guess it's a semantically meaningful name that denotes where you're deploying to. Now, inside of these environments, you can have a whole set of different options as well. We provide these three out of the box. You can have others as well, quality assurance, for example. So development, staging, and production are typically the three that a lot of organizations may have. So we can go ahead and create those ones. All right, so now that we've created those three environments, the next step is for us to do is to create a deployment process. So this is where basically the rubber hits the road. This is where we define the series of what are called steps that will run to deploy our software. So let's see how that's done. So we'll go ahead and create a process here. And what you'll notice is the first thing is we're going to present to you a display that gives you a bunch of options. So we're basically creating kind of like a recipe. We're doing a step-by-step process for deploying our software. And there's lots of options that you have available here. So we provide a bunch of different steps out of the box. So you can do things like run a script. You can do things like execute a variety of other steps as well that target cloud providers. You can integrate with Kubernetes, for example. There's lots of options there. You can run Terraform plans. Let's go ahead and keep this simple. And we're just going to run a very basic script. Incidentally, run a script is our most popular step. It seems like a lot of people like control, so that's fine. So this is the view that you are presented when configuring a step. So a step is a deployment process is a collection of steps, and steps can run in a variety of ways. But essentially, this is the step description for this script step. So we're running a script here, and there's a bunch of options that you'll see in this list here. Don't worry about it. This is just, there's lots of knobs and buttons to press. We're just going to show you how this works in this very simple scenario. So you can give this script a name. We'll just keep the name as is, run a script. We can define where this script is coming from. That's another issue for, I guess, another more advanced sort of session. But know that you can write scripts in line here. So for example, I can just, write host and say, hello world Feb 2024. So I can denote this in PowerShell. We have other languages as well, other environments that we support as well. So those are things that you can use. We also have the ability inside of this script to insert what are called variables. So when your script runs or when your deployment runs, there's a bunch of values that will be set in an ephemeral sort of way. These are variables. These are placeholders that you can use for a whole host of different sort of values. So you can see there's lots of stuff here. We denote this using a notation called octostash. These little curly braces that you see here, these are placeholders for values that you want to inject. What this does is it allows your scripts to be pretty flexible. So you can do this for anything that supports scripting in our environment. So there's run a script, but there's other steps as well. There's well over 600 steps that you can use as part of a deployment process, by the way. So we've defined our script step here. This is our source code. And we can do a bunch of other options as well. We're going to go ahead and specify this to run on a worker. A worker is like an agent. If you've used any solution out there where you have this notion of what's called an agent, which is like a delegate or something that will run work, this is what we call a worker. So this is essentially what we're doing. We define this as part of a worker pool. Again, this is kind of, we provide for you a hosting environment to run these things. You can certainly run this on your own infra if you want to. But just for this example, we're just going to run this on the example that you see here as part of this environment. And again, the reason why we're doing this is just to keep it simple. So let's go scroll down. You can see there's a bunch of options here. We'll talk about those later, and we'll just go ahead and click save. So the first thing, one thing you'll notice here is as we're building this out, inside of this well here, you're going to see a bunch of steps that execute. So these steps are basically do this, and then do this. It's sort of like a recipe for basically cooking something. And to show you an example of this, there's plenty of other ways in which you can define these things. So just to go and show you another example, if I jump into another project here, and I take a look at the deployment process for this project, you'll see that this is a series of steps that are constructed one after another. These steps can run in parallel. These steps can run on conditions, whether the previous one failed or not, etc. So this is essentially what we're defining. But anyways, let's jump back to our example. So we have our deployment process set up. We're running a script. It's executing and outputting a text to the run. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do what's called create a release. Now, this one's a little bit tricky to understand for some folks because when people think of release, certainly developers, they think of a release as, oh, that's a deployment. No, a release is a snapshot. So again, coming back to the issue or the point I made earlier, when we're defining our taxonomy, a release is basically a saved state, a snapshot of all the values that you've persisted and all of the things that are necessary to make a deployment work. The reason why we do this is because we want our deployments to be consistent. If we take a snapshot of values, especially variable values that don't change depending upon environments, that will make our deployments more consistent. And that will allow us to have reliable deployments as we evolve from different environments, for example. So if we promote a release from, say, deployment to staging and then on to production, we can know that because we've snapshotted values, that release will be consistent. So if we go ahead and create a release, you'll notice we can give it a version number. We can specify a bunch of properties here. We can specify, semantic versioning if we want. We can give it release notes, etc. I'm just going to use the defaults here and click save. Now, what has happened here is it's taken a snapshot of that deployment process that I specified, that run a script step, and it's also taken values associated with this. Like there's a thing that we have called a lifecycle. I haven't defined that yet, but essentially it's the series of steps that will be applicable to environments. And if I had integrated packages like zip archives or NuGet packages or other things like that, anything pointing to Git, those would be incorporated. Snapshots for variables, as I mentioned before, any artifacts, etc., etc. So I can now take this release and now I can deploy it to an environment. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to development. Now you'll notice that when I specify that, it's taking that snapshotted release and now it's giving me the option to specify a bunch of things like when do I want to deploy this? Do I want to do it now or do I want to do it later? Do I want to execute this and exclude any of the steps that I've defined as part of my deployment process? This is sometimes useful because there may be a deployment process that you define that a certain step isn't applicable to a particular environment. An example of this might be, let's say you have a step in here that does a check to notify people, hey, I'm about to do a deployment. Is that okay? You may not want to do that in, say, in a development environment or a staging environment, but you definitely want to do that in production. There are ways to do that automatically, by the way, but this is a way in which you can get control over that. You can also specify like the failure mode, whether to use what happens when a deployment failure occurs. It does happen, so you need a way in order to mitigate that, and there's steps in which you can integrate that. Once that's all done and you're happy with the settings, we can click on the deploy button. And what this will do is now take you to a window, which is our task runner. So these are running deployments. You'll see a series of values that will appear here when these steps run. You'll also get a running task log of everything that's occurring. So if I wanted to, I could specify I want to see everything that's occurring as part of this run. And you'll see values that are propagating here as this is running. So the reason why this is taking a little bit is because we have to spin up the worker. This is part of our cloud infrastructure, but this is a very fast process. And when this executes, it will basically provide you an output of the string that has been occurring. So you can see this is deployed successfully. You get our ta-da sort of rocket ship appearing. We've launched, which is great. There's our hello world message in line with the worker that I described earlier. So we've gone ahead and successfully deployed to our environment there, which is provided to us, which is a hosted environment. So this is part of the traceability or auditing capabilities integrated within Octopus itself. We've gone ahead and issued a deployment. I can see this. If I'm a member of the team, I can see this deployment having occurred. I can get a sense of why this occurred or when it occurred. If I go to my dashboard, there's my version there. I can then take this and I can then promote this to staging if I wanted to. So I can deploy this to staging or to production. And I'll have assurance there knowing that this will work because I have that snapshot, that release that I talked about earlier when I created this deployment process. So this is essentially Octopus in a nutshell from a very, very high level. This is your sort of hello Octopus demo to show you how and why this works the way it does. Now, there's a bunch of other options that we can talk about, but let's go ahead and jump back to the slides and take a look at what else we can describe here. So that's your hello Octopus demo. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming for you, but this is going to provide you some context of how this works. Now, everything I've shown you is done through a front-end UI. It should be noted that everything is backed by an API. So you can certainly use our API to target custom deployments. You can integrate with builds. We have integrations with a variety of CI processes and servers. And we also have a CLI. There's a bunch of other tools you can use with this as well. But most people like to use the UI or see the UI to understand it. So that's why we're showing it here. So this is an example of a deployment process you may define. This is what a deployment process may look like. You'll have a bunch of steps in here. You can see in this here, we have a bunch of steps for configuring databases. We're running scripts. We're notifying folks via Slack, which is a built-in step that we have. We can do what are called manual interventions, which is basically like notify a human, let them know that something's happening and get them to approve or deny an execution. These and other things we can do. So just to kind of show you, this is our visual representation of our deployment process. It includes things like conditions as well. So if something fails or something succeeds, you can fork and the execution and also include child steps. You can have steps run concurrently as well or in parallel. We have integrated markdown notes. This is useful if you have more than one member of your team looking at the deployment process and they want to see basically how or why these things are executed as part of a deployment process. We also have, as I said before, the ability to execute these steps in parallel if you so wish. And we have also these labels. What these labels are basically defining steps that will run for certain environments. So remember in the early example I showed you, just jumping back here, let me just jump back here and I'll show you. So in our earlier example where we did this deployment, you may have noticed that when we define this, let me go ahead and go in here, and you'll notice that we've defined this as part of our environments here. What we can do as part of our process is we can say this step will only run in these environments. So when you define your process here, let's jump in here, and I want to execute this for a particular type of environment, I can specify those environments. By default, we say run in all environments. But if I wanted to, I could say, you know what, only run in the development environment. These and other features we have built in, and this is consistent across all steps. So this section here called conditions is consistent across all steps. So any step that you define as part of your deployment process can have conditions relating to environments, the run condition, whether or not it's required. You can specify things like, I want to retry it. I want to retry this in case it fails. There's a variety of reasons why you want to do this as well. Sometimes there's network latency. Sometimes servers are unreliable. There's any number of reasons why you may want to do this. You can specify things like timeouts. So how long do you want to wait until you deem this as being a failure? So these and other options you can specify as part of steps. And these are all the things that we provide out of the box. So as I mentioned before, these are labels that will denote where these things run, which environment they run in. All right, so that's essentially what Octopus looks like. Let's talk a little bit about some of the value add that you get from using Octopus as part of your deployment process. So the biggest one is reliable deployments. This is really why you use a tool like Octopus, is because you can define these deployment processes and have them run consistently and reliably. Not only that, every operation that will be done will be audited. So they'll fall into an audit log that you can then see and then ask the question, why did this deployment fail? Or why did this deployment succeed and execute at this time, who approved this, etc. So reliable and risk-free deployments with rollback capabilities, so the ability to roll back changes if something goes wrong. Because let's face it, things can go wrong, and they often do. And so you want to have a consistent way of rolling back those changes. That's built in as part of Octopus. So the other thing that we like to talk about is the only release management tool your operations team can use too. So there's a feature of Octopus, which I haven't shown you, but it looks very similar to defining a deployment process called runbooks. Runbooks are the ways in which your ops team can execute automations in conjunction with deployments. So there are a variety of tasks that you may want to do as part of an ops team. For example, you may want to do server maintenance. You may want to provision infrastructure or run emergency procedures. These and other types of things you can do as part of our runbooks integration. And this is something that you can do as part of your DevOps teams, which is great. You can apply updates, etc. There's lots of things you can define as part of runbooks. The same way in which you define a deployment process is the same way you'll define a runbook. In addition to that, if you're utilizing anything with containers, if you're utilizing Docker or Kubernetes, for example, you can use that in conjunction with this. We support that. We support integration with YAML. If you're utilizing Helm charts, we support that. We have our own Helm chart for configuring Octopus, which is great. And we have inline support for all of these things, which is awesome. And then if you're utilizing this in conjunction with a variety of what we call tenants, this is something that is a key feature of Octopus, the support for multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is a core capability of Octopus, and it allows you to define tenants. And tenants can be, it depends on where you're defining them. So if you're a hotel chain or you're a retailer, you want to define these tenants in terms of where these things reside, geographically, for example. You can define those and then deploy these across thousands of different deployments using a single deployment process if you so wish. And as I said before, auditing is built in. We also have RBAC, or role-based access control, built in. We have single sign-on capabilities as well. These and other sorts of features come straight out of the box. If you're curious at all, there's a bunch of other integration scenarios that we also support. So one example here that's just denoted by this graphic. So we have integrated support with Sumo and Splunk for your audit log. So in addition to the audit log we maintain, we realize that a lot of folks want to use audit log providers that are external to Octopus, and we support that out of the box if you want. We also support integration with ITSM. So if you're wanting to do approvals, etc., utilizing a tool like ServiceNow, we support that as well. Jira Service Management is another popular scenario that a lot of folks want to support. So that's another scenario that we support as part of your compliance integration as well. So these and other types of integration scenarios we think about a lot. And this is something that we care deeply about. We realize that a lot of folks want to use these scenarios in conjunction with Octopus. And so we support those out of the box. All right, let's take a look at another demo. In this case, what we're going to take a look at is a demo that integrates with GitHub Actions. So as I mentioned before, life begins with the CI process. And so we'll take a look at an example that utilizes that. So let's jump back into our example here. And I'm going to jump into the scenario that I mentioned here. So it's kind of irrelevant what's happening in the deployment process, because this is defining a bunch of steps here. And believe me, we have customers who have tens, hundreds of steps as part of the deployment process. There's no restriction on that. But think of this as some generic deployment process will execute somewhere. How does this start? Where does life begin? Well, you'll find this typically in a CI process like GitHub. So this is an example of a GitHub org. This is one that we actually have available for customers who want to see Octopus work in conjunction with applications, with CI environments. This is our sample applications org. And inside here, we have a project or repo called Trident. The name is irrelevant, but what we've defined here is a YAML file. A YAML file is a text-based file based on indentation. It's the way in which you define workflows to integrate with GitHub, and it uses a feature called GitHub Actions. Actions are like, you can kind of think of them as like components for your CI pipeline in GitHub. So when something happens and you want something to respond to changes, you'll utilize a feature in GitHub called GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions trigger based on a series of events. So in this case here, this is basically anytime I push changes to a particular branch, whether that's main /feature /bug fix, etc., or someone clicks a button, inside of GitHub, I will execute this workflow. So workflow underscore dispatch is a catch-all for GitHub that basically provides a button experience inside of GitHub to trigger this. So in this YAML file, you'll notice there's a bunch of jobs that are defined. Jobs are basically named versions of a series of steps that will execute in GitHub. So I have here called build and push application. And inside here, a job defines a collection of steps. So this is, more than you need to see, but what I want to show you down here near the bottom is, let's assume we've done a bunch of work. In a typical CI scenario, we'll build our source code, we'll compile it, we'll then run a series of tests, and then we may do some other things like doing some packaging, etc. Down here near the bottom is where we actually start integrating with Octopus. Now, we have a series of actions that we've defined as part of GitHub. You'll find these up on the marketplace. So if you go to github.com/marketplace, so you can see this is a live demo. I'm not baking this, but if you search for Octopus deploy, you'll find a series of actions that we've defined here as part of the marketplace. So these are actions that you can use as part of your YAML descriptions to integrate with Octopus deploy. So you can deploy a release, you can push packages to Octopus, you can run runbooks, you can create releases, etc., etc. There's a bunch of operations that you can do. So what we're doing here in this scenario here, where we're defining our YAML, is we are doing simply that. We are simply utilizing those actions in conjunction with a CI workflow. And this is the integration that we have with CI. So we basically integrate at the scenario that is provided by the CI process. So if that's Jenkins, or if that's TeamCity, or GitLab, or name a popular CI provider, that's how we integrate with those. So in the case of GitHub, it's GitHub Actions. And so we provide actions that you can use to integrate with Octopus. And these will run as part of the execution context inside of GitHub. And so that's how we run as part of this process. Excellent. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them. There was a question here I missed earlier. Hi, if we pause the video, can it be resumed? Yes, absolutely. You can continue to resume if you pause the video. Sorry, it was a little late answering this question. But yes, you can do that. I should also mention that we will post a recording of this video up on our YouTube channel. And you can just search for Octopus Deploy. You'll find our YouTube channel there. So recording of this will also be available in case you're wanting to see this, or share it with friends. There you go. So anyways, getting back to our scenario here, you can see we have a bunch of actions that have been integrated here. This is integrating with Octopus, and this will run in concert with this deployment process. So when this deployment process runs, this is what will be executed. Now, another question that often comes up is like, okay, so you defined a script action here. What other sorts of actions can you do? Like, what else can I do with the deployment process? And just card changes here. So when I click on this add step, you may have noticed at the beginning, we had all these types of different steps here. There's a lot of steps that you can execute in here. In addition to that, if there's a step that we don't have that you want, it may be supported by the community. So if you click on community steps here, we've got over 545 steps that have been written by members of the community. So integration with Redgate, integration with RavenDB, Oracle fans out there. Anyone raving about Oracle? There you go. So you can integrate with Oracle. You've got JSON Web Tokens integration, HashiCorp Vault. Some of these have been written by members of the Octopus Deploy org. So we have employees who write them themselves. Others have been written by passionate members of our community. But like I said, if we don't have a step for you that does the scenario you desire, chances are the community has covered that off. In addition to that, you can go to this website here, which is library.octopus.com, and you'll see that exact menu of steps as well. So you can scroll through this and see all the steps that we support as part of the community. So you can do a search here, for example. So if I'm interested in, say, something with integration with AWS, you can see all the steps that are supported there, in addition to all the steps that we have support for inside of the product directly. So these and other types of steps that you may want to use are supported there. So if I want to update folks via Slack, or I want to update folks via Teams, I can do that as well. There's a bunch of steps that we can do. Some of these steps are very simple. So I can do, as part of this deployment process, I can check what version of .NET is installed on the target machine. Sometimes these things are important. You want to make sure that you have a certain version of .NET installed, for example. So these and other types of steps you can run as part of that process. But getting back to the example here, this is how we integrate with a CI process, whether that's Azure DevOps, whether that's TeamCity, whether that's Jenkins, as I mentioned before. These and other types of scenarios we support. And so this is definitely something that you can use going forward, which is great. So yeah, we've got our deployment process. We've got an integration with CI, which is great. And we execute these in concert as part of our our pipeline. All right, so that is roughly what you've learned in this webinar. So most importantly, in addition to showing you how these things work, I want to help you understand why you should use a tool like Octopus. So remember, most tools that do CI/CD don't do a great job of deployments. It's kind of like left as a exercise to the reader. So Octopus, that's really specialized is in deployments. You learned a little bit about fundamentals. So namely, you learned about things like projects, deployment processes, and releases. Remember, a release is a snapshot that you use as part of a deployment. You've learned how to create a deployment process, knowing that deployment processes can also be persisted in Git. So we have a feature, as I mentioned at the beginning, called config as code. So everything you saw me use in that tool can be persisted to Git and changed as a text file. And then you saw an example of triggering a deployment through a CI process via GitHub Actions in this case, and all the actions that we have built in there. Don't forget, we have a bunch of actions integrated as part of this. This is not an exhaustive list, but it kind of really brings home the point that you're supported if you're using a tool like Octopus for a variety of scenarios that you wish to integrate with. You can download a trial today. We push out updates all the time, and we have a bunch of other downloads that you can get at our website, which is at octopus.com/downloads. There you'll find downloads for our CLI. You'll find a bunch of other tools as well. You'll also get updates to our versions. We do comparisons of releases. We also provide a series of our latest features and highlights and a easy to read sort of diagram. You can see all the changes that are coming. And if you want, you can also see our roadmap. So this is our website. We have roadmap.octopus.com. In fact, let me just go ahead and quickly show this to you. So if you go to, let's see, what have I got here? This is our website. That's our roadmap. Here we go. Yep. So if you go to roadmap.octopus.com, not only will you see the things that are under consideration, but you also see things that are planned. And you can also see what we've released, what we've shipped. So we've shipped lots and lots of features. And if you drill into one of these things, we'll give you a listed breakdown. You can vote. You can say how important this feature is to you, for example. And if you want, you can also submit your own ideas. So let us know any features that you're wanting to see as part of Octopus going forward, which is great. So roadmap, we've got our community, which is at /community, and we've got a bunch of folks that you can join. You can join our Slack channel. We have over 6,500 members in our Slack channel that are talking about deployments, for example, if you want to find out more. And we've got a bunch of resources there for you to use. I have some links here for you as well. So octopus.com/docs. If you want to go and check out this video after the fact, you can go subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at /octopusdeploy. And lastly, you can reach me at this email alias if you want. I'm happy to answer your questions. With that, I'd like to just quickly jump over to the Q&A pane. I don't see any questions at this point in time, which is fine, totally fine. If you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. I'll wait 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Anyways, thank you very much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. We'll be doing these monthly. If you want to see another example, let us know. And again, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post videos there weekly, if not daily. We're posting all the time there, and you'll see feature demos. You'll see shows like Deploy on Friday, where we talk about the general news. But until next time, thank you very much for your time and attention. Oh, there's a question that just came in. Sorry. I'm a quality engineering manager. Is there a migration path if the company is CloudFormation, Terraform, etc.? So the good news here is you don't have to migrate from a tool like Terraform. You use them in conjunction with those tools. So this is a tool that is just deployments. And, yes, there are tools out there like CloudFormation, Terraform, Ansible, Pulumi, for example. These are all tools that provide some notion of provisioning and configuration management and things like that. You don't stop using those tools. You continue to use those tools. They are great tools. We love those tools. We use those tools ourselves. What this is a tool in conjunction with those tools. So this is a tool that specializes namely in deployments. And the good news there is we integrate with those tools. So the reason why you use a tool like Octopus is because we define a taxonomy. We define things that are very strict. We define things that are typically missing in other tools like environments and deployment processes and runbooks, etc. These you'll use in conjunction with those tools. You won't stop using those tools. You'll just add on to it. And that's why we call it the best of breed pipeline. You can continue to use those tools happily, and we integrate with them. And so that's the reason why we think of it that way. So great question. Thank you very much for that question. Again, if there aren't any other questions, I'll just give it a second. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Great. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone. Happy deployments.